I think there's a lot of people that are still really big Bond fans, and I get it if you want to value a player with vertical ability. The problem is that while that was valuable 20, even 10 years ago, it just isn't that valuable anymore with the way the NFL landscape has changed. Hey y'all! For this video, we'll be continuing going through the 2025 wide receiver prospects and covering Isaiah Bond from Texas, Isaiah Neyor from Nebraska, Bech from TCU, Jacolby George from Miami, and Joey Brooks from Louisville. If you're new to these, my wide receiver evals use some different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out part 1 of the series, which should be accessible at the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details on how I do my grading in that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the receivers from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link in the description. For any new viewers, I have evals and full scouting reports out for players like Emeka Egbuka and Alec Manor and more, which you can check out on my channel. I'll be continuing going through my top 50 wide receivers in the draft, so to be sure you don't miss any other parts of the wide receiver series or any other positional group series in the future, be sure to subscribe. Now let's take a look at Bond. Starting with a look at Isaiah Bond's basic stats. After a decent year in 2023, Bond really crashed hard in 2024 and saw statistical decreases in targets, receptions, and receiving yards, and finishing with just 56 targets that led to 34 receptions for 540 yards and 5 touchdowns. Though a lot of his statistics did worsen, he at least didn't have more drops and had 2 drops for a drop rate of 5.6% for 2024. After playing slightly more snaps from the slot in 2023, he played slightly more than 3/4 of his snaps from the outside in 2024. Looking at his highlight games against Ohio State and his 2 games against Georgia, they were very underwhelming, with Bond failing to get more than 4 targets, 2 receptions, and 22 yards in any of the highlighted games. If you look at the rest of his season, he got 5 or more targets in just 6 out of 14 games, 3 receptions more in just 6 out of 14 games, and 50 more receiving yards in just 6 out of 14 games as well. Those aren't very high marks to be able to hit, especially when talking about a prospect who wasn't a lot of people's top 5 of the position group going into the season. Now, there is a fair point to bring up that poor quarterback play, particularly when passing downfield, played a part in Bond's struggles. But to know how much of his struggles were quarterback dependent and how much were related to him, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he has good hands and catches the ball with good hand technique despite some really ugly drops. He's also willing to go up in the air after the ball despite being a smaller receiver. He can also make some really well-timed difficult adjustments to throws that add a little bit more upside to him despite his size and frame. Also, he has great ball tracking skills to find balls in the deep area of the field like a center fielder. The ability to finish catches over his shoulders is a necessity for him to be successful as a deep threat, so it's good to see him be so confident in making those catches. While he typically caught the ball with good hand technique, his hand strength and focus could have some lapses, which especially showed in trouble converting contested catch situations with just a 27.3% success rate in 2024. What also led to troubles in those situations was Bond not fully extending his arms. While he wouldn't resort to body catching very often, he also didn't extend his arms out completely, which gave the defenders more of a chance to make a play on the ball thanks to his smaller frame. So Bond has an up and down start with a decent B for his hands, C- for his jump ball and contested catch, and then a great A- for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, while his release and route running need a lot of work, he has good foot speed, which gives him the potential to improve in these areas. As I said though, he does need a lot of work in his release and route running. He will often resort to just trying to get around defenders with his foot movements and aren't quick enough to be able to cleanly get past defenders. Also, he doesn't use his arms enough in his release and tries to use his legs to do the heavy lifting. What makes things much worse is the slow reaction to defenders' press. That delay in responding and not having the urgency to make the first move led to defenders often dictating the play and sometimes even bullying him and completely shutting him down. As a route runner, he ran a limited route tree and ran with little to no nuance in the routes he did run. I would at least like to see him run with some tempo or stem breaks, since those could create some easy opportunities for him with his athleticism. Instead, he just kind of tried to overpower defenders with his speed, which led to inconsistent results. He also doesn't always have the cleanest cuts due to rushing this process, leading to sloppy cuts due to being too upright and not getting enough hip sync. While he's out on his routes, he can easily be pushed off his route path and really have a hard time adjusting the contact to get back on course. In general, he also just had a lot of trouble disengaging from physical coverage, which will only get worse in the NFL. He also needs to improve his eye for zone coverage in the NFL. I know there's difficulties with this in my summer scouting series, and he just still hasn't shown great awareness in finding openings against the defense, which is really disappointing with his amount of experience now. So things suddenly got a lot worse for Bond with a D+ for his route running and a C- for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, despite getting an egg on his face at the combine after not breaking the 40-yard dash time as he predicted, he still has smooth, fast speed that shows on the field. His speed and movement skills also show after the catch, as he's able to use his quick transition after the catch to quickly pick up yards and blow past defenders. That being said, he isn't a stereotypical speedy receiver who just runs to the outside. Bond runs with good vision and has a good eye for when to cut back inside. He's also very effective at using his blocks and knowing how to adjust his course to ensure his block can seal an opening for him. When a defender is getting close, he has some good cutting ability to give him a chance to make a defender miss into open space. The ability to contribute as a playmaker after the catch adds more versatility to his game, and it was kind of disappointing not to see Texas want to use that side of his game even more. What also adds versatility is the experience playing in the slot and on the outside to give offensive coordinators different options with him. However, his smaller frame often typically leads to him being taken down pretty early if defenders do get his hands on him, which does make him a little bit less exciting after a catch. Also, he's a pretty ineffective blocker due to his small frame and very poor mechanics. So, I think there's a lot of people that are still really big Bond fans, and I get it if you want to value a player with vertical ability. The problem is that while that was valuable 20, even 10 years ago, it just isn't that valuable anymore with the way the NFL landscape has changed. First, there are just so many elite athletes that are entering the league every year. In the past, running a 40 in the 4.3s would almost guarantee a player would get drafted in day 2. Now it's just kind of brushed off since there's so many other athletes running around that same time. The other thing that has decreased the use of speedy vertical players is the high rate of cover 2 in the NFL. For those unaware, cover 2 defense essentially helps minimize deep passes. With so many NFL teams running that as their primary defensive play, it has a limited number of big plays we're seeing and limits the production vertical players can have. So a player like Bond likely won't have the room to operate and make an impact. On top of that, deep threats need quarterbacks who can connect with them deep down the field, or else they'll struggle to produce like Bond did in 2024. Finally, I'm just honestly not a big fan of speedy, smaller receivers for a lot of reasons as I mentioned before, but also just because they often get bullied in their routes and struggle with press too much to be too productive. A lot of people will point to Tyreek Hill as a reason why they can work, but it's important not to focus on the outlier and instead focus on the multiple small receivers that regularly enter the NFL who fail to make an impact. So with great athleticism and understanding of how to get extra yards, Bond earned a B for his yards after catch potential. For his future role, while I am hesitant to trust a small, speedy receiver, I do recognize that athleticism, ability to play inside and outside, and ball tracking skills downfield could fit well in the right offense, which earned him a B-. Finally, for his athleticism or RAS, I had to estimate this, but I did give him a B+ since he did run a good 40 time, even if it wasn't as fast as he was hyping it up to be leading up to it. For a summary of his strengths, he has quality hands and ball tracking skills to be a really natural downfield receiver if given the opportunity. He also shows some really solid ability to catch away from his frame to help expand his smaller catch radius to one that has a little bit more upside. Also, he is able to pair his good vision and great athleticism to be a threat after the catch, even though Texas didn't use him in those situations quite enough. Those hands can have good flashes, he really struggled finishing contested catches. A lot of receivers struggle with that issue, and Bond unfortunately could continue to have that issue for his entire career if he doesn't use full arm extensions on a regular basis. Also, he really struggled against press and physical corners in general as they could disrupt his timing and throw him off his path. He's also a pretty limited route runner, which makes it a bit concerning how he'll handle a more expensive route tree in the NFL. I'm particularly worried about how he'll handle it due to not doing a great job running his current routes and running them at full speed instead of using good nuance to win consistently. So, by taking the average of all his grades, Bond earned just a 2.54 out of 4, which puts him in my may have a future role tier. I was lower than most on Bond going into the season, and his 2024 year unfortunately didn't do much to change my mind. It was just really rough showing for him that exposed his biggest weaknesses and didn't highlight his strengths enough. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure why he decided to declare for the draft even. I think he could have done himself a big favor by returning to school and having a bounce back year. Unfortunately, that opportunity has passed now, and he's kind of stuck hoping for a team to fall in love with his speed. I just think teams will likely realize that he likely won't be a consistent playmaker in the NFL since he was never one in college and things will only get tougher in the NFL. As for a comp for Isaiah Bond, I have another speedy receiver who I was lower on than most back in his draft cycle, Philip Dorsett. Both have great speed and experience playing inside and outside. Also, both are very capable of expanding their catch radius by attacking the ball in the air. Both also have good potential after the catch thanks to their quickness and movement skills. Unfortunately, neither have big frames to survive tackles and neither just rely on their speed. Both also try to rely on their speed too much as route runners as they have poor nuance and deception in their routes. Also, both struggle at converting contested catch situations, which will lead to some frustrating missed opportunities. Dorsett lacked the polish and the frame to be a regular contributor in the NFL, and if you're Bond's inconsistent college career is signaling the same will happen for him. Maybe a coach will find a way to unlock Bond better than coaches did for Dorsett. However, I just think he has too much negative momentum right now, and it's just hard to see him rebounding and being the player that once excited a lot of people. Moving to our next receiver, Isaiah Neyor from Nebraska. After recovering from a torn ACL from 2022 and failing to get much playing time at Texas in 2023, Neyor transferred to Nebraska to hope to be more involved as a receiver. Unfortunately, it was kind of the way that Bond's transfer went as he failed to be an overly productive one, getting just 63 targets returned to 34 receptions, 455 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He also had a fair amount of drops with 3 for a drop rate of 8.1%. Also not surprising with his 6'4", 218-pound frame, but he played nearly every snap from the outside for 2024. Looking at his highlight games against Iowa, Ohio State, and Colorado, it probably shouldn't be too surprising that he struggled to make much of a regular impact, as he only managed to get more than 2 receptions and more than 15 yards against Colorado in his highlighted games. Unfortunately, that lack of consistency was present throughout the whole season as well, as he was only able to have more than 3 receptions in 5 of his 14 games, and 20 yards or more in just 6 of his 14. Similar to Bond, those are some really alarming numbers, and those are very easy marks to hit for an NFL-level receiver. Especially that more than 20 yards, since a lot of receivers often hit that mark on just a single reception. So will his stats be telling for his grades like Bond's were? Well, let's find out. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, his size can show up at times with some very good adjustment to balls to get his hands on the throw. He also shows some great awareness on the sidelines to finish some tough catches as well. On that though, oof. Things could get really rough, especially with his hands. He only had a drop rate at 8.1%, but he really seemed to be fighting them with the ball at times. His hand technique would be very shaky, and he didn't seem confident catching the ball at many times. That led to a number of double catches which could turn into drops in the NFL. He also had a hard time tracking the ball in all areas of the field and struggles to finish catches over his shoulders. His confidence also looks shaky in his hands when he goes up to attack the ball, and he isn't always able to rise through contact. So Neyor has a really rough start with just a D for his hands, C for his jump ball and contested catch, and B- for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he showed some good awareness against zone coverage and he seemed to be able to find openings on a regular basis. Against man coverage, he also has some good timing with his stem fakes to help establish leverage after his cuts. He can also help get leverage thanks to his release. He has quick feet and a variety of moves to help him win at the line. However, he seemed to run a pretty limited route tree. For routes he did run, he seemed to often be rushing his cuts due to not having enough hip dip, leading to very rounded cuts. He also had a lot of difficulty stacking his defender, which capped his ability to consistently help as a deep threat. He also lacks tempo in his routes, which further hurt his ability to separate downfield. That being said, he just kind of struggles to separate on a consistent basis in all his routes, which is really disappointing to see with the tools that he has. Finally, while he can use his arms in his release, he often still lets himself get jammed up by the corners too often. That causes him to slow down and affect the timing of his routes, and often gives a win to the defense. So Neyor ended up earning just a C- for his route running, but a solid B- for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism for RAS, Neyor was one of the biggest winners of the combine, posting the 8th best RAS score out of 3,445 receivers since 1987. So that speed definitely shows up after the catch. He also doesn't disappoint with his size as a blocker, as he's a great blocker and can operate effectively as a move blocker as well. He does a good job getting square with his target, whether he's in motion or not, and does a good job establishing his base. Also, he does a good job keeping his feet moving to help stick with his block. That being said, he can also come off as less athletic than his testing indicates due to his difficulty evading tackles. He goes down to first contact also too frequently, and has little to no wiggle to be able to create after the catch. As for how he fits in the NFL, I think it's hard to expect him to be much more of a regular contributor since he failed to do that even in college. He's a sloppy route runner, so he isn't able to win underneath very often, and his poor hands and ball tracking makes it hard for him to finish catches downfield. All in all, he just kind of looks more like an athlete than a receiver right now, which is just a really hard sell to me personally. So even though he has great athleticism, he earned just a C+ for his yards after catch potential and future role. That great athleticism though earned him an A for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he has great athleticism to help him as a deep threat. He also has quick feet and a number of moves he can pull off at the line to help get him the ability to get leverage quickly with his release. Also, he showed good awareness to finish catches around the sidelines, which will be important with his work on the outside. Finally, he was a quality blocker who can be used in a few different ways to be able to help provide a quality block. However, I just have a hard time seeing him make a significant impact in the NFL, especially with his lapses in hand technique, difficulty finishing catches through contact, and poor ball tracking. Those just make him way too volatile and will likely frustrate a coaching staff. On top of that, he isn't the most dynamic after the catch with little ability to make defenders miss in space, and is unable to plow through them despite his 6'4" frame. So by taking the average of all his grades, Neyor earned just a 2.33 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. Neyor is definitely a great athlete who may be at best being used in special teams as a gunner, where he doesn't need to be trusted to catch the ball as much. I just worry that his struggles will only get worse when space gets tight in the NFL. Also, with a high number of freak athletes and ones who are much more fluid than Neyor, he might be viewed as less of a unicorn. As for a comp, I have Simi Fehoko as his comp. Both have great size and athleticism, giving them great potential. Also, both are very capable of some great catches that they had to adjust to. However, both are very raw route runners and have issues with ball tracking. Also, both have struggles with their hands that could wear out a coaching staff's patience. Fehoko has struggled to get playing time, but finally got some snaps with the Chargers in 2024. It unfortunately still involved a lot of struggles, suggesting that he hasn't quite progressed as enough to be able to earn regular playing time going forward. If Neyor doesn't improve like Fehoko hasn't, I feel he'll likely have an extremely hard time earning offensive playing time and even a roster spot. Going to our next receiver and one of the risers since the Senior Bowl, Bech from TCU. After failing to make much of an impact these past couple years at TCU in 2023 and LSU in 2022, Bech showed some magic he showed off in the 2021 year, easily setting career highs in all receiving categories, getting 91 targets that went for 62 receptions, 1,034 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Despite the increased usage, he still only had a single drop, which is a testament to his hands. Also, after primarily playing from the slot in previous seasons, he moved to the outside with a little over 70% of his snaps coming from the outside. Looking at his highlight games against Baylor, Utah, and SMU, he mostly has strong performances with at least 5 receptions, 98 yards, and even 2 touchdowns against Baylor and SMU. His Utah game was less impressive with just 3 receptions for 46 yards and no touchdowns though. While Bech comes off as a consistent and reliable player thanks to his hands, his receiving totals were a bit inconsistent as he got 5 or more receptions in just 6 of his 12 games in 2024. However, he was able to get at least 50 yards in 8 of his 12, showing that he can still produce pretty well with the catches that he does get. For the first part of the season, he seemed like a constant force until the end of the season, when he started to slip up and failed to get more than 3 receptions at 30 yards in his final 2 games. Thankfully, he had a good Senior Bowl week to quiet any concerns that could have caused. But to see if he's worth the hype he got at the Senior Bowl, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he is just such a darn good pass catcher. There are some players who people will say anything in his direction will be a catch, and that's usually just hyperbole, but that really feels like it's the case for Bech. He has such strong, reliable hands, and consistently is able to catch it away from his body. Also, he never showed any hesitation in taking a hit to be able to finish a catch. There were even times when he would leap up into hits or run towards defenders, and he would still make a play on the ball and secure the catch most times, as evident by his 65% success rate on contested catches. He also made some really impressive adjustments to the catch, being able to make the play on the ball regardless of whether it was high or low. That gave him such a huge catch radius that made him a quarterback's best friend. Also, he was able to use his strength to still rise through contact to make a play on the ball and bail out his quarterback a lot of times. What also made him very easy to throw to was his ball tracking skills. He has some great ball tracking skills for lofted 50-50 situations, but also down the field. He would do a great job playing like a center fielder at times, easily finishing catches that were less than ideally placed over his shoulders. He also showed great ball tracking and concentration skills to be able to follow the balls that required tough last-minute adjustments and typically still finish those catches. Now, while he was good at rising up to attack balls, I think he could do a better job making things a little bit easier for him by doing a better job establishing his position and boxing out the defender with his big frame. So Bech has about as good of a start as you could ask for, with A- in his hands, jump ball and contested catch, and body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he showed very good feel for finding openings against zone coverage. Also, he showed some really nice flashes of deception with his head and stem fakes. His understanding how to get good leverage and maintain it with his frame also helped him make an easy target for quarterbacks. He also does a good job using his frame and strength to maintain his path on his routes and not be pushed around. Also, despite being new to the outside and regularly having a face press, he's still one of the better receivers in the class at using his hands in his release. He also does a really good job having urgent hands to make initial contact and dictate that rep. While time usage is really good in his release, it does really worry me on his routes. He can get a bit pushy and grabby while running his routes, which could lead to penalties in the NFL. Also, his route running in general does make me a little bit nervous in the NFL, since he has really struggled to get separation consistently in college. His cuts just also weren't overly impressive from a burst or technique standpoint, as he lacked great hip sync, which led to rounded cuts. Those poor, non-explosive cuts and his lack of great speed often made it easier for defenders to get back into good coverage. Also, his success in release may also decrease in the NFL. While he has good hand use, his release seems to be a bit one-note in his lower body at times. That predictability may make it easier for more savvy cornerbacks in the NFL to be ready and have appropriate counters. So while Bech did show some good signs, his lack of great burst and lack of polish led him to get a C+ for his route running and a B- for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role and athleticism or RAS, he has good strength that shows after the catch as he had good contact balance to go through small defenders to pick up some extra yards. That strength along with his frame also gives him good potential as a blocker. However, he was a bit disappointed as a blocker despite that combination. He often struggled to get aligned with his target and had poor leverage which led to defenders peeling off his block too easily. That being said, his lack of ability to get yards after the catch is apparent from his film, even if it's not apparent from his combine testing. On film, he clearly lacks great top speed and seems to be a bit stiff as an athlete when it comes to change of direction ability. That led him to have little ability to make defenders miss in open space. Also, though he scored a 9.45 for his RAS score, which is a great score, I do think we need to take it with a bit of grain of salt since he didn't run the 40-yard dash. As for how he fits in the NFL, he could slide in as a possession receiver thanks to his catch radius and hands. The biggest thing that could hold him back though is his ability to separate. If he fails to separate due to his lack of burst, quarterbacks may not want to target him regardless of his catch radius due to high risk targeting him. So Bech ended up earning just an okay C+ for his yards after catch potential, a B- for his future role, but a very good A- for his athleticism or RAS, but again, it may not be super accurate due to him not running the 40. As a summary of his strengths, Bech has some of the best hands in his class and pairs that with great ball tracking skills to make him a very safe target. However, he makes himself a plus target thanks to the adjustments that he can make to throws that thanks to his ball skills and his tough hands to finish catches even when getting slammed. Though he isn't a burner, he also has good contact balance after the catch to give him a bit of an edge after the catch as well. However, he just lacks great top speed and explosiveness to break off big plays or get consistent separation. He also lacks much wiggle to make defenders miss in space and lacks great hip sync to make sharp cuts to give himself a better chance of getting consistent separation in his routes. Also, despite having a great frame, I was pretty disappointed in his blocking. It wasn't bad by any means, but I would just love to see him bully small defenders that he's clearly capable of pushing into the ground. So by taking the average of all his grades, Bech earned a 3.08 out of 4, which puts him in my good starter tier. While his ball skills are admirable and could be argued that they could give him a very high floor, I do think he has a bit more risk than some want to admit. As much as having a big catch radius and good ball skills can help make a player at least be a good contributor, we do have a lot of examples even just last year when this led to disappointment. Last year a lot of people were very high on Jalen Polk, which has aged very poorly with him being one of the worst rookie receivers last year. If you look at the strengths and weaknesses of Polk and Bech, it gets a little bit scary with how much overlap there is between them. Now, I will say I am higher on Bech than I was on Polk last year. However, I'd be lying if I had said I wasn't afraid of having a similar experience of a similar letdown as Polk believers had last year with Bech. As for a comp, to show my faith in Bech, I have him comp to Tyler Boyd. Both are known for their reliability as pass catchers and impressive body adjustments. Both can also track the ball very well and have strong hands that finish catches through contact. Also, both have good physicality to their route running to help themselves get open. However, neither have great speed or burst, which limits their big play potential on deep passes and after the catch. Also, that lack of burst sometimes led to some struggles in maintaining separation. While I do think Boyd was a better route runner than Bech when he was a prospect, I think there are a lot of similarities in their games and potential projection in the NFL. While Bech may never be a leading force for an offense, he has the traits to be a reliable contributor who could have some big games sprinkled in here and there. Moving to our next receiver, Jacolby George from Miami. While George took a small step back statistically due to more competition for targets, he was still a fairly productive player, earning 77 targets, which went for 53 receptions, 752 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Now, he did have a fair amount of drops with 4, which equaled out to a drop rate of 7%, but his drop rate has steadily dropped throughout his career. Also, he played the majority of snaps outside with a little over 80% of his snaps from the outside in 2024. Looking at his highlight games, Miami didn't have the toughest schedule, but George did a good job stepping up in a lot of the toughest matchups against Syracuse, Georgia Tech, and Duke, with at least 4 receptions and 74 yards in all those highlighted games. In general, he's a fairly reliable presence with at least 40 yards in 8 of his 13 games, but to see that led to good grades, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, his hands are good as he catches the ball with good hand technique and does a good job working his way back to the quarterback. He also does a good job consistently catching the ball away from his body and can make good adjustments to the ball to help expand his catch radius. He has good timing with his ball attacks and also shows good foot awareness around the sidelines to keep his feet in bounds. Also has very tough hands, which showed with him converting 63.6% of his contested catch situations in 2024 and 60.9% for his entire career. However, as I mentioned, he can still struggle with drops, especially when the volume was increased, which his decreased volume helped mask some of those issues. Also, he can sometimes have trouble overcoming a smaller frame to make catches, which could be more of a problem in the NFL. So George had a solid start with a B for his hands, B- for his jump ball and contested catch, and B for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he has very quick feet, which shows in his release. His route running also had a bit of upside thanks to his quick cuts he could make. He also does a good job getting good hip sync in his cuts to be able to make his cuts with minimal extra steps. He also shows good signs of using nuance, such as using good tempo as well as head fakes and stem fakes to make it more difficult for defenders to cover him. His eyes for openings against the defense also helped him consistently beat zone coverage and find openings when the quarterback scrambled. His smaller frame did show though in his route, as he can sometimes have trouble dealing with physical coverage. They can often rattle him and dictate where his route goes. This also held him back from being more of a vertical threat, as he can sometimes get tied up with contact and be unable to stack his defender. Despite some of his good route running habits, he can also struggle to get consistent separation, and I think the issues against physical coverage played a big role in that. A couple of other things that also impacted his ability to separate were his lack of explosiveness in his cuts, and sometimes getting a bit too complacent in his routes, rounding his cut if he felt like he was going to win on his route. Also, he does have a bit of a limited release package, which does also impact his ability to consistently separate. So George ended up earning just a C+ for his route running and a poor C- for his release. For his yards after the catch potential, future role, and athleticism to rest, he's able to pair his quick feet with good timing to make defenders miss an open space. He also runs with really great patience and vision to let his blockers get set and open up alleys for him on screen plays. Also, though he'll likely never be a great blocker, he does bring some good effort to his blocks. As I said though, blocking will likely never be a strength of his due to his small frame. His anchor was also pretty limited in college and will only get worse in the NFL. Also, with his quick feet, he often lacks the quickness or burst to be able to consistently make defenders miss or bite. Finally, his lack of great speed lets defenders catch up to him on his routes and also limit his big play ability after the catch. As for his fit in the NFL, while I do like some of the fundamentals when it comes to his route running and ball skills, it's just hard to envision him being much of a contributor with his lack of athleticism and a small frame. That combination led to him getting a RAS score of 3.9, which is very poor. It's just hard for receivers to be able to overcome big athletic differences between defenders, and I'm just not confident George is at the point with his technique to overcome those challenges. So despite the poor athleticism, George still scored a B- for his yards after catch potential, a C for his future role, but an F for his athleticism or RAS. As a summary of his strengths, he has very quick feet and clean footwork which can help him avoid defenders and make some really nice cuts in his routes. Also, he can compensate for a smaller frame with his ability to attack the ball and high point the ball. Also, with the lack of athleticism, it's important that he can beat zone coverage, which thankfully he can do with his great eye for spotting openings. Finally, he brings some really nice vision on screen passes after the catch to be able to make a more viable option in those situations. That being said, he has a pretty limited release package which could limit his ability to get leverage from the outside in the NFL. Also, he lacks the vertical ability due to being unable to stack his defenders with a smaller frame. Also, while he can make some really clean cuts at times, he can also get really sloppy at times, which plays a major role in his separation issues. Finally, his size and limited athleticism can also play a role in those difficulties separating, and in general may hold him back from being a more regular contributor in the NFL. So by taking the average of all his grades, Jacolby George earned just a 2.17 out of 4, which puts him in my unlikely to contribute tier. George is a solid player, but is one that I think will have a hard time making a big impact in the NFL between his lack of great athleticism and his small frame. He does have some nice traits like his quick feet and good route running fundamentals. However, neither is great enough to help him consistently win with his routes and will limit how much he can truly help an NFL offense over another option on the roster. As for a comp, I have Kyle Phillips as his comp. Both have quick feet and good route running fundamentals that can make them intriguing prospects. Also, both can make sharp cuts and have good vision after the catch to add a little bit of wrinkle to their game. However, neither have the speed or burst to consistently separate. Also, both have small frames which led to struggles against physical coverage. Phillips has dealt with some injuries, but he has struggled to get playing time even when he was healthy due to having trouble making consistent impact. George will likely be in a similar boat with his small frame, which I think will make things too difficult for him to be able to overcome, given his other limitations, especially with athleticism. Going to our last receiver this part, Jacolby Brooks from Louisville. After really only contributing a sophomore season at Alabama, Brooks broke out this year with his first season at Louisville, getting 93 targets that went for 61 receptions, 1,013 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he also went big with his drops, as he had 7 drops on the year, which equaled out to a drop rate of 10.3%. Though he doesn't have a lot of track record due to limited use prior to this year, I would say that drop number wasn't a one-off thing, since he also had a drop rate of 11.4% on 65 targets back in 2022 at Alabama. Also similar to his time at Alabama, he played the majority of snaps from the outside, with nearly 90% of his snaps coming from there in 2024. For his highlight games against Pittsburgh, Clemson, and Notre Dame, he had solid performances, most of them with at least 4 receptions and 42 yards in all 3 games, and getting close to 70 yards in both the Pittsburgh and Notre Dame game. Now we unfortunately see his drops come up here in those games, with 2 against Pittsburgh and 1 against Notre Dame. Throughout his whole 2024 season, he was a consistent contributor with at least 5 receptions in 7 of his 11 games, and at least 60 yards in 9 of his 11 games. So to see if his production equaled out to good grades, let's start taking a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he can make some really sensational catches sometimes, including one-handed catches at the end of his frame. He's also capable of making some really tough adjustments to the ball and is very comfortable catching the ball at the end of his frame, giving him a huge catch radius. He also can make catches over his shoulders, which is a necessity with the way that he's used as a deep threat. He even has tough hands, which helped him convert 69.6% of his contested catch opportunities in 2024. He also does a great job being able to high point the ball at times with some good well-timed ball attacks. He also shows good awareness around the sidelines to make tough catches while keeping his feet in bounds. Now while he can make some truly incredible catches, he also has some really ugly drops. The issue with Brooks is that he can lack focus with his hand technique and ball tracking, which led to missed opportunities and drops. Those lapses in his ball technique also led to some awkward ball attacks that, while successful in college, could be less successful in the NFL. So with the inconsistencies, Brooks earned a C for his hands, a B for his jump ball and contested catch, and a B for his body control and ball tracking as well. For his route running and release, he showed good awareness for zone coverage and did a solid job attacking the open areas of the defense. Other than that though, things got pretty rough. He's a pretty limited route runner with the majority of his routes being vertical, hitches, and post patterns. In his vertical patterns, he really struggled to get open against off coverage due to lack of great speed and not having enough nuance in his routes. He often rushes his routes with no nuance, leading to sloppy rounded cuts as well. He could really benefit from using more stem fakes to make a bit more efficient in vertical routes. Also, he can really struggle establishing leverage, which makes his success more inconsistent against better defenders. He also struggles against more physical defenders, is going to have trouble navigating around contact on his routes, and can be pushed off his route path by tough coverage. His limited release package also doesn't help, as it doesn't help him stay clean consistently. He often just tries to shake and bake past defenders, but he doesn't use arm counters enough and isn't quick enough to win with his feet. So he unfortunately has some pretty poor results for his route running and release, earning just a C- in both. For his yards after the catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, he has good timing in his cuts after the catch to make defenders miss. Also, though he lacks great long speed, he has good acceleration to pick up yards after the catch. His transition upfield also helps him pick up yards, and he shows good peripheral awareness to know where defenders are when he makes his first move. Also, though he doesn't have a hefty frame, he is a very willing blocker and will keep up plays downfield to help with the block. However, his long speed is just very questionable, and there were a lot of times when he got leverage against good athletes, but had them work their way back into coverage after catching up to him. If that happens more in the NFL with good athletes, then that'll just instantly reduce his potential impact. So his lack of great long speed could impact him since he had a fair amount of damage as a vertical player last year. However, I think his hands will be the biggest thing that determines how good he is in the NFL. I think if his hands were better and he had more focus on an every down basis, he could be a decent role player. However, right now he's just way too inconsistent to trust, and I think the drops will likely get old real fast for an NFL coaching staff. So Brooks ended up getting a C+ for his yards after catch potential and future role. For his athleticism or RAS, he ended up earning a projected C, even though he didn't do any combine testing just based off how he looked on film. As a summary of his strengths, he has a big catch radius thanks to his size and ability to rise up and attack the ball. With his ability to rise up for balls, he also showed the ability to make some truly sensational catches which could really excite people if they just watch his highlights. Also, though he isn't the most athletic receiver, he does have good acceleration, vision, and spatial awareness to be a capable player after the catch. However, he has very questionable long speed, which will likely hold him back in yards after the catch situations on his vertical routes. What will also hold him back on being successful in vertical routes in the NFL is his struggles with physical coverage, as he can let defenders sometimes manhandle him due to his smaller frame. Even if he does get open, he still has a high chance of dropping it right now, which he will need to clean up if he wants to get more regular playing time in the NFL. He will also need to find a way to clean up his route running while expanding his route tree as well, as both weren't quite at NFL ready levels yet and could be a barrier to him getting playing time. But taking the average of all his grades, Brooks earned just a 2.25 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. Brooks may have had a nice breakout year, but I just don't feel comfortable trusting him. He's a bit of a one-note player with his vertical ability, but that can be dubious to trust with his lack of great speed. Add in his lapses in ball tracking and inconsistent hands, and he kind of just feels like a headache for an NFL coaching staff waiting to happen. Now, if he at least cleans up his hands, then that could make him a lot more interesting. However, this has been an ongoing issue for him his entire college career, so we may just need to accept that this is how he's going to be going forward. As for a comp, I have Dyami Brown as his comp. Both are known for their vertical ability and can make some really impressive and difficult catches. Also, both are very capable pass catchers when it comes to making catches over their shoulders. However, they can have lapses when catching standard passes, which can make them less reliable. Also, both can struggle with physical coverage and press due to thinner builds. Dyami Brown has had a hard time making an impact early in his career due to his vertical ability being less viable in the NFL. I have concerns the same could happen for Brooks, especially with his questionable athleticism. If that is the case and he continues to struggle to finish routine catches, I just have a hard time seeing him stick on an NFL roster. And that's all for part 4. Let me know what thoughts are on all the receivers in the comments and who you think I'm too high or too low on. This is just part 4 of 10, so there's still a lot more evals that will be done over the next few weeks. So to be sure you don't miss any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the videos, it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. If you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack and sell the full written eval out for each player at the same time as the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.